I'm 91 years old. I still say the number out loud sometimes, just to hear it, just to make sure it's real. 91 sounds like someone else's life, someone already finished. But I'm still here, waking up each morning, putting my feet on the floor slowly, feeling the weight of all the years settle into my bones before I even stand. I'm telling you this because I don't have much left to lose by being honest. When you're young, honesty feels dangerous. It feels like it could cost you something: love, stability, approval. When you're old, dishonesty feels heavier. It sits on your chest at night. It keeps you company when the house is quiet, and everyone you once spoke to daily has either moved on or passed away. I was married for 58 years. That sentence sounds solid, respectable, like something that should come with certainty and pride. And in many ways, it does. We built a life. We raised children. We survived hard times. From the outside, it looked like success. From the inside, it was quieter than it should have been. Not empty, just muted. I didn't understand what that meant until much later, until I had the silence to really hear it. These days, my mornings are slow. I sit on the edge of the bed and wait for my knees to cooperate. I look at the dresser where his watch used to sit. I kept it there for years after he died, even though it no longer ticked. I didn't wind it. I just liked knowing it was there, stopped at some meaningless hour, as if time itself had paused out of respect. Eventually, I put it away, not because I stopped missing him, but because I needed to learn how to exist without holding on to symbols. That's something no one tells you. Letting go isn't one moment. It's hundreds of small decisions you make when no one is watching. I met my husband when I was 24. I was still learning how to be a person then. I thought adulthood arrived all at once, like a door you walked through and suddenly knew how to live. I had a job I was proud of. I wore sensible shoes. I knew how to cook a few meals well. I thought that meant I was ready for marriage. He was kind, reliable, quiet in a way that felt safe. He didn't sweep me off my feet, but he didn't scare me either, and at that age, I valued calm more than excitement. My parents liked him immediately. That mattered more than I realized at the time. I had spent my whole life trying to be the good daughter. Choosing someone they approved of felt like another box checked correctly. We talked about the future easily: children, a house, work. We didn't talk much about ourselves, about fears, about needs, about what we expected love to feel like in 10 or 20 years. We assumed it would take care of itself. I don't remember our wedding day very clearly. I remember the dress itching under my arms. I remember being nervous about tripping. I remember smiling until my cheeks hurt. I don't remember what he said to me when we were alone afterward. That should have meant something, but I didn't think about it then. The early years were good, busy, noisy, full of motion. We were building something, and building gives you a sense of purpose, even when you're not sure what you're building toward. We talked more then, or at least we talked enough. We laughed, we touched, we shared a bed and a sense of direction. But even then, there were things I didn't say. When something bothered me, I told myself it wasn't worth mentioning. When I felt lonely, I assumed it was temporary. When I wanted more attention, more tenderness, more curiosity, I felt embarrassed by the wanting. I thought love meant not asking too much. That idea followed me for the rest of my life. The first child changed everything, the way children always do. Suddenly, there was no room for subtle feelings. Everything was practical. Feedings, schedules, exhaustion, survival. I became very good at managing things. I took pride in that. I liked being capable. I liked being needed. I didn't notice how easily capability replaced intimacy. My husband worked more. I understood why. We needed the money. He wanted to provide. I told myself this was partnership. At night, we collapsed into bed, backs turned, already half asleep. We said goodnight out of habit, not out of connection. I remember thinking more than once that we'd talk when things slowed down. Things never slowed down. They just changed shape. More children came, more responsibilities, more routines. We became efficient together. We could run a household like a well-oiled machine. But machines don't ask how you're feeling. I would sit at the kitchen table after everyone went to bed, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, and feel something settle in my chest. Not sadness exactly, more like absence. I didn't have the language for it, so I ignored it. When my husband came home tired, I didn't want to add to his burden. When I felt overlooked, I told myself I was being dramatic. When I missed being seen as more than a mother or a manager, I pushed the thought away. I was afraid that if I spoke up, I'd sound ungrateful, so I became agreeable, pleasant, easy to live with. People praised that. They told me how lucky he was to have such a calm wife, how lucky our children were to have such a steady mother. No one asked what it cost me. I didn't ask either. Years passed, not in a rush, but steadily, like water wearing down stone. Small disappointments accumulated, but none of them seemed large enough to justify a confrontation. We didn't fight. That became a point of pride. We told people we rarely argued. They nodded approvingly. What we didn't say was that we rarely talked about anything that mattered. I learned how to sense his moods without asking. He learned how to avoid subjects that made me quiet. We danced around each other carefully, politely. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror and feel like I was watching someone else's life, someone competent, someone composed, someone a little hollow. I thought that was just adulthood. When the children grew older and needed me less, I felt unmoored. I didn't know what to do with the extra space. I tried filling it with chores, with volunteering, with anything that made me feel useful. Usefulness had become my substitute for closeness. My husband and I ate dinner together every night. We talked about news, about errands, about who needed what. We didn't talk about longing or regret or the quiet sense that we were living parallel lives under the same roof. I noticed how little he touched me, not in a cruel way, just absent-mindedly, like someone who assumes something will always be there. I noticed how little I reached for him. We were both waiting for something to change, without ever naming what needed changing. That's the mistake I want you to understand. Not the big dramatic ones, the small daily ones, the ones that feel harmless. Assuming love will maintain itself if you don't disturb it. Assuming silence is kindness. Assuming time is abundant. I told myself passion fades. I told myself companionship was enough. I told myself this was what long marriages looked like behind closed doors. And maybe for some people it is. But for me, it was a slow forgetting of myself. There were moments, brief, sharp ones, when I almost spoke. When I almost said, I feel alone, or I miss you, or I need more than this. Each time I swallowed the words, I was afraid of what would happen next, afraid he wouldn't understand, afraid he'd be hurt, afraid nothing would change and I'd feel foolish for hoping. So I stayed quiet. That's how years disappear, not in dramatic exits, in withheld sentences. When the last child moved out, the house echoed. I thought the quiet would bring us closer. I thought we'd rediscover each other. Instead, the distance became impossible to ignore. We sat across from each other at dinner, chewing slowly, listening to the clock. I realized I didn't know what he thought about most days. I wasn't sure he knew me either. We tried, a little. Awkward conversations, polite questions. It felt like meeting someone you once knew well but hadn't seen in decades. I considered leaving then. Just considered it. late at night, lying awake, staring at the ceiling. But I didn't. I told myself it was too late, too disruptive, too selfish. I told myself I'd made my choice long ago. That idea, that choices are permanent, that you're not allowed to reconsider, kept me in place more effectively than any argument ever could have. Then he got sick, not suddenly, gradually. Appointments, diagnoses, medications, adjustments to daily life. Caring for him gave me focus. It gave me a role I knew how to fill. I was good at it. I organized pills. I drove to appointments. I asked questions. I advocated. People praised me again. What a devoted wife. What a strong woman. I accepted the praise quietly. In some ways, illness brought us closer. We talked more, out of necessity. We spent time together because we had to, but there were still things we didn't say. I wanted to tell him I was showing up not just because it was my duty, but because part of me still loved him deeply. I wanted to ask if he ever wondered what might have been different between us. I didn't. It felt cruel to bring up old wounds when time was limited, so I kept choosing comfort over truth. When he died, the house fell silent in a way I had never known. Not just quiet, but empty. A different kind of stillness. I mourned him. I missed him. I missed his presence, his routines, even the things that frustrated me. But I also mourned the life we didn't fully live together. Grief has layers. Some are obvious. Others surprise you months later, when you realize no one will ever know certain parts of your story because you never shared them. After his death, I had clarity I wish I'd had earlier. I saw how often I'd chosen ease over honesty, how often I'd mistaken endurance for love. I realized marriage doesn't end because of one mistake. It erodes because of unspoken needs, unattended moments, postponed conversations. I don't say this with bitterness. I say it with sadness and understanding. We were both shaped by our time, by expectations, by fear of disruption. We didn't know how to talk about emotional things. We weren't taught that love requires vulnerability, not just loyalty. Still, knowing the reasons doesn't erase the cost. Now, at 91, my days are simple. I sit by the window. I read slowly. I watch the light change on the walls. Sometimes I talk to him out loud, not in a dramatic way, just comments, observations, things I never said when he was alive. There's no one to hear them now but me. If you're listening to this, I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to feel guilty or scared. I just want you to notice. Notice the moments you choose silence when you want connection. Notice how often you say later. Notice whether you're being known, not just relied upon. Marriage is not sustained by good intentions alone. It's sustained by presence, by curiosity, by the willingness to be uncomfortable for the sake of closeness. I waited too long to understand that. I loved my husband. I still do in my way. But love, unexpressed, becomes something smaller over time. I don't have advice, really, just a truth earned slowly. Don't assume time will fix what only honesty can. Don't confuse peace with distance. Don't make yourself smaller to keep things running smoothly. Because one day you may be sitting in a quiet room, surrounded by a life that looks complete, realizing how much of yourself you never fully shared. I've made peace with my past, as much as anyone can. But if I could carry one thing back with me, it would be the courage to speak when my voice was still steady, when my days still felt endless. Time doesn't warn you when it's slipping away. It just goes quietly while you're being reasonable.